It is now time for the main event. So this is my elastic for my waist. I did cut it to the same measurement of my waist because I figure I'm going to overlap the ends. Therefore, I will still lose some of the measurements. But I wish I made it smaller, honestly. It just felt too loose for me. So here I have my ends overlapped and I'm just doing a whole bunch of stitches over it to secure it down, making sure that when I'm stretching my waist, nothing's going to pop, nothing's going to come undone. A lot of times I do the stitches to where I'm creating zigzags all over, but sometimes I just do straight stitches all over to just make sure it is secure and it's not going to come undone. But really, once you start doing this, it's hard for this to come undone. Despite, I don't know, you would have to really just not do enough stitches for it to come undone. It's going to be secure. And once that's done, I just cut off my thread, and just like I would do it if I were to do this on a sewing machine, the way I would prepare my elastic, that's what I'm doing here. I just divided my sections in half. So I had several sections I had divided with my elastic within my elastic here. It's a bit hard for me to explain. I don't know if it's just the time I'm recording this, but I just divided my lesson into different sections. That's the best I can think to explain it to you as it's pretty much the same way I would do with a sewing machine, in my opinion. It's except that I use more pins because I will need different sections to sew in with hand sewing. So that's why I have all the different sections. And I'll do even more dividing than that once I start adding it to my fabric. So this is my fabric here. I have my circle round waist going. So I find my halfway point on the center front and then just mark the center back from there. And then I use my iron of pin to mark the points, my sections. So that's what I'm doing here. So from the center back to the side waist, I'm going to mark a section here. I use my iron off pin, and that's what I did all the way around. Each quarter, I divided it in half into different sections. So that's how I went about it. Just as many sections I have in my elastic, that's how much I'm adding onto my fabric here. It may seem hard the way I explain it, but it's really not. You know how much you divided your elastic in, and so it's just automatic to do so with the fabric as well. And I feel like this is the same thing I would do even with sewing on a sewing machine. On the sewing machine, of course, I would have less section, but it's pretty much the same step in my opinion. So this is after I added all my sections and I have my marks. And now I have my elastic. I'm going to add it onto the fabric. I feel like the video could have started here, honestly, but it didn't. So I have my first point where I overlap my fabric. I'm going to attach that to the center front mark. And because I have my line here, it is to help guide me, to help me sew a straight line or as straight as possible. So I just make sure that it is centered on my elastic. And so I put my half point and I'm going to connect it to my center back. And I'm going to pin it to it. I'm using that pin that I had on my elastic. I'm just going to pin it at the center back. And of course, like I said, I try to make sure my line is centered on my elastic by just filling it. And now I'm going to get my quarter points and attach it to my quarter points on my fabric and pin it in place. And that's how I went about the whole round for my waist. Just the section I marked on my elastic, I just connected it to where I marked it on my shirt. And it's that easy. That's why I say if you want more sections, you can add it on the elastic and then do so on the fabric as well so that you just connect it together. And then when it's time to stretch, you just stretch. Despite all the sections that I added with, well, I divided my elastic and my fabric in, I still added some more section by just stretching and finding the halfway point like I'm doing here. And I just divided that section into half again. And I did that all the way around. The more elastic I used, the easier it was for me to sew around, to, especially because I had to stretch my elastic as I hand sew, I'm stretching my elastic. So it was just easier for me to have smaller section to sew so that it would just be easier on my hand as I was sewing through. That's why I have so many section and that's why I use so much pins. That's why this project took a lot of pins because you want to just have the sections small enough to where you can stretch your hand as you can stretch it with your hand as you sew, because you will need to stretch it as you hand sew. And if your sections are too big, it will be very challenging for you to um, hand sew, or keep it stretched as you hand sew. It's not going to look nice. And I will show you a section where I did not stretch it as I was sewing, and it's pointless if you don't do that. So that's why you need to have your sections small enough so that you're able to stretch them with your hand as you sew. If they are too big, you're not going to be able to do so. Or not, it's not going to be that convenient or easy to do so. It's going to take a lot of work on your hand. So over here, I'm showing you how small my sections really were that I sewed. And that's because that's the section that would fit the best around my finger for me to sew without my hand doing too much work. And that's just the only way I really know how to do this, honestly. That is the most convenient way I know how to do this. So that's what I ended up doing, just dividing it into sections small enough that would fit around my finger for my hand to not have to do too much work or too much stretching. So just as you see here, my sections were that small. So despite the sections that I had on my elastic, once I added it to the fabric, I ended up dividing it into smaller sections. So lots of pins were used. And so this is what my project looks like so far after pinning. And it took me almost 11 minutes to pin all the way around the waist. Can you imagine? I know I would still do the pinning even if I were doing it on a sewing machine, but it wouldn't have been as many small sections, honestly. My sections would have been larger. So that's just to show you how long it takes when it comes to hand sewing, just for preparation, just to get everything right. So now I'm ready to start sewing. I have my thimble on, and I'm just fitting my elastic over my finger, stretching things over my finger. And of course, my sections are small enough that they will fit around my finger for me to sew a section and then keep going around and keep moving my thimble underneath and continue sewing, because my sections are small enough that I'm able to stretch them over my finger. So to get started, I'm doing the half back stitch zigzag. It is the fastest one. That's why I'm using this one. It is secure enough. There was a point where I really underestimated it, but it is a strong stitch. It works. I washed my projects and no issues. I mean, there are different stitches that I showed you, different zigzag stitches that you can use, but this is the fastest one, so I just go with this one, honestly. But there are different ones you can use from what I've shown you. So I'm just doing the zigzag stitch, the half back stitch zigzag, and I'm just making sure I catch my elastic underneath as I sew. You may need to use a stronger needle for this. I am using a very thin needle, but the stronger your needle, the better it is. The more confident you feel in hand sewing, especially if you have big hands or big fingers like me. It's just more convenient to use a bigger needle, but here I'm using a smaller one, and it does feel like a struggle. So that's why you use a needle that feels comfortable to you and that will get the work done. So if I were to use a longer one and a stronger one, it would have been more convenient for me. But this was the next needle I had threaded, so I just pick up whatever I have threaded. But I'm just doing my zigzag stitch here and catching the elastic from underneath. That's what I'm going to do all the way around my waist. So each section I get to, I just stretch it over my finger with my thimble underneath, my thimble on my finger underneath my elastic, and then I just get to sewing my zigzag stitch. This is what my stitches are looking like on the inside. The neater your stitches are on the right side, the nicer they will look on the inside. But I'm not bothered because even on a sewing machine, my stitches are still not always straight because my elastic is facing the bobbin and then the top is facing me. So it is usually whatever I get is whatever I could get is just what I get. So I'm not really bothered by how it turns out with the hand sewing. It's still strong. So here I'm showing you how to finish off when you're running out of thread. I'm just going to do my last stitch here, and I'm just going to finish it off because I'm running out of thread. You can see that my thread is really short. So I'm just going to tie things off and finish off my stitch. And then I bring the thread to the reverse side and then just cut it off or remove it from the needle. And I took a needle that I had threaded. I do thread a bunch of needles and set them aside when I'm hand sewing. It makes things faster, so I don't have to stop and keep threading needles. I just have everything prepared and just pick them up as I go. So here I'm restarting my stitch, and you can see I'm restarting right where I finished from that last thread. I'm just picking up right there and doing my starting stitch from that point and tying things off, and then just continue on sewing my zigzag stitches. Believe me, I try my best to keep my hands steady because I did realize that my main video where I showed you how to add on elastic to the fabric, there was a lot of movements going on. So I tried this time to keep my hands steady, but I am working with a tripod in front of me. So with the elastic, I find that to be a bit challenging to keep my hands steady, but I try my best. Here I am just showing you what it would be like if I were to hand sew a dress with me having a whole lot of fabric to go through to hand sew. That's how my hand position would be with the fabric in my hand. So although it may seem like it would be challenging to hand sew a dress, to hand sew this for the waist, starting from a hemline because there will be so much fabric, it would actually be easy because the amount of fabric I would have in between would allow my hand to rest even more as I sew. So it's not that challenging in my opinion. You just have to prepare your sections the best way that works for you when you are stretching your for when you're stretching it over your finger. So this is a section in which I did not stretch my elastic underneath as I should have, and you can see how it stays, what it looks like. It is pretty much straight, not much stretch going on in that little section. And so here I'm just finishing off my round of my zigzag stitch, finishing off my elastic waist. So I just go right over that first stitch, that starting stitch that I started from at the beginning, and I just finish on top of it right there. I guess you could overlap from the first few stitches, but I just finished on that first stitch. And that's what my waist is looking like after I was done sewing the elastic onto my waistband. I did wish I cut my elastic smaller. I feel like the gathering effect would have looked nicer, but it is fine as it is. It worked well enough, and that's really what I wanted to do, just to demonstrate how to add elastic onto the fabric. In my opinion, all the zigzag stitches that I've demonstrated on the channel are pretty solid, pretty strong. They are made for garment making. None of them are loose. They are pretty tight in my opinion and very strong stitches. So I highly recommend them. And this one is the fastest one. So that is the one I use most often. I decided at last minute to just add some straps by using the scrap fabrics I had left for my top here, and so I went ahead and did that. I washed it, and this is my final top. That's my final project after washing it, and I tried ironing although it doesn't look like it, but I did try ironing it. But this is what I have. All my transfers from the charcoal pencil is all gone, and that's what I have left. This is my waist. My elastic is pretty solid, pretty strong and secure. It is not going anywhere. Or any of the zigzag stitches that I've shown you can be used to sew down the elastic. Even the three-step zigzag stitch, but that takes a long time, so I rarely use that. But all of the stitches I've shown you are for garment making, so you can use either one of them and you're going to get good results. I just like using this because it's fastest to sew, therefore I just use it a lot, but it is still strong and solid. And hand sewing stitches are very strong in my opinion. Your fabric will get old before your stitches do, honestly. But that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Till next time, bye.